And we're back. Hello, and thanks for listening. Mike Talks Big podcast. You can follow on Twitter at Mike Talks Big. Here's the website, MikeTalksBig.com. And anything else you probably need is in the show notes. Comment line 612-424-0034. Have you ever noticed this? Especially in today's world, making demands of people doesn't really generate a very good response these days. People don't like to be critiqued or criticized at all in today's world, which makes it really hard for parents and makes it really hard for employers. And you've heard about it in the workplace that, my God, we can't hire anybody that can take any kind of criticism or get better. Making demands of people not real popular in today's world. And I don't know whether this has anything to do with, somebody like a Donald Trump who makes extreme demands of people, and whether it's just become incredibly unpopular because it just comes across as total dictator. But when you run a business, sometimes you have to make hard decisions, right? Every business needs to take an inventory, and if the players aren't performing on the team, then you need to talk with them about that. Otherwise, you'll have a failing business. Jimmy Butler wants to be a winner. And the title of this segment here today is, You Are Right About Jimmy Butler. If you're a Timberwolves fan, yes, you were thrilled when Jimmy Butler, exactly the right free agent, was traded to the Timberwolves. Now, he didn't choose to come here. He was traded by the Chicago Bulls to Minnesota. Jimmy was on vacation in Paris and find out, hey, you're now a Minnesota Timberwolves player. But you were right. You were right about Jimmy Butler being the right free agent. Do you remember how excited everybody was? Jimmy at his press conference gave out his mobile phone number. Timberwolves fans were psyched. They knew that they had a guy who was a proven all-star, a guy that had done well in playoff games. He didn't disappear on the Bulls. He demanded excellence. This is the guy we need in here. Jimmy Butler loved you, and you loved him. He had high expectations, and that's exactly what you shared in common with Jimmy Butler. Is, by God, do something. Get in here and make demands of these guys. We need culture change. He simply demanded more from his underperforming Timberwolves teammates, similar to all the other teammates and players that have been on the roster for the last 10 years. He needed to change the culture in Minnesota. Minnesota Timberwolves fans know that this was exactly the free agent that we needed in this market. I've heard it on talk shows. I've seen writers write it. It's been on television, been on Fox Sports, everywhere, that Minnesota cannot attract a culture-changing star free agent that can lead this team through the playoffs and possibly to an NBA championship. Well, you got one. You were right. You got Jimmy Butler. The Wolves got their guy. And it went very well for a while. Timberwolves made the playoffs, lost in 5 games to the number 1 seeded Houston Rockets. Fans appeased, but at least hopeful. Jimmy Butler had established himself as the free agent complete player the franchise had been lacking since Kevin Garnett left for Boston. And then guess what happened? He made the mistake of starting to make demands. He was taking inventory of his business, which was the other players on the team. He was doing the job he was hired to do, which was to fix the culture of a franchise that had a very long losing culture. Then, the younger players on the roster started to groan and complain, and all of this escalated. Becoming a champion turned out to be a lot more work than some players were willing to tolerate. He's ridiculous. He's over the top. He's always barking at us. Karl Anthony Towns, an emerging offensive star diva, finally got to the meddling owner about this Jimmy Butler nonsense. Glenn Taylor, the embattled proprietor of the Minnesota Timberwolves, who also owns the Star Tribune and has lots of control over media outlets in the Twin Cities because he broadcasts their game on their radio stations and TV stations and TV networks like Fox Sports North has influence. So this guy, Glenn Taylor.
He's dealing with Glenn, who doesn't know shit about basketball. He knows how to make money, but he don't know anything about basketball.
Starts listening to this unproven future star, Karl Anthony Towns. And I know this is not what you want to hear, right? Because it's the truth. And I'll tell you why Karl Anthony Towns is unqualified coming up shortly. This conversation here is about Jimmy Butler. It is not about Karl Anthony Towns. Jimmy Butler, who knows the ropes, pushed back against the unproven lack of effort, Call of Duty playing young stars on the team, and became the villain. Now let's revisit what we talked about at the top. The single thing that you as a fan had in common with Jimmy Butler is that you both wanted to win now. Finally, the team gets the free agent that was traded to Minnesota from Chicago. It fell right in your lap as a fan and as a franchise. You get the guy you want. He decides to get on board to help this team win, and the problem owner and offensive-minded diva future star wreck it. And then Jimmy Butler starts to push back. Between game 4 and 5 of the Timberwolves opening round playoff series against the number 1 seeded Rockets, a story in the Chicago Sun-Times quotes Butler appearing to question the commitment of some of his teammates. And so it begins. Quote from Jimmy, "I put so much into this game and I only play to win. I don't play for any individual stats or accolades." After being eliminated by the Rockets in Game 5 of the first round, Butler does not fly back to Minnesota with his teammates. And I'll be the first one to say, not what a leader does, not a mature thing to do, clearly done out of complete and total frustration. He feels like the organization is against him. And the franchise's future star, Karl Anthony Towns, is in cahoots with the meddling owner, Glenn Taylor, and it's on.
Who doesn't know shit about basketball. He knows how to make money, but he don't know anything about basketball.
So we jumped to July 3rd, 2018. Another Chicago Sun-Times report says that Butler is fed up with the nonchalant attitude of his younger teammates, specifically Karl Anthony Towns, and has no intention of signing an extension with Minnesota. Have you heard any stories about Karl Anthony Towns being a problem for the team? Because I haven't seen any. Wow, I haven't heard anything. I listen to a lot of sports talk radio. I haven't seen any writers write about Karl Anthony Towns being any kind of potential problem for the team. All I see is that Jimmy Butler everywhere is causing a problem because he is making demands on his teammates that they're not comfortable with. But through this entire Jimmy Butler process, I never heard anything negative about Karl Anthony Towns as it applies to Jimmy Butler. July 15th, Butler passes on a 4-year, $110 million extension offered by the Minnesota Timberwolves. For fans, it looks like Jimmy Butler is passing on an incredible contract offer, and he simply does not want to be here. And to me, this looks like Glenn Taylor trying to make Jimmy Butler look bad. What most fans don't realize is this, that $110 million over 4 years is something that Jimmy Butler could get from a handful of other teams that want to compete. He is this coveted player that you were right about, is a sought-after free agent that doesn't usually come to a market like this. So at this point, Jimmy Butler still has a year left on his free agent contract. So a few more months pass by. We reach September. Sources report the owner's trading him. That was made clear. It's just a matter of when, one representative told ESPN on Friday. And this is the most important part. Timberwolves general manager Scott Layden, who works under Tibbs, is usually the point person for other GMs to talk trades. Glenn Taylor has reportedly told teams to contact him directly.
He's dealing with Glenn, who doesn't know shit about basketball. He knows how to make money, but he don't know anything about basketball.
How do you go from decades of not having a real star in this town, knowing that you don't easily attract star free agent players to a place like Minneapolis? You finally get your guy, and then you wind up in this place. Ownership meddling. That was Kevin Garnett, the best player in Minnesota Timberwolves history, world champion, MVP, saying the owner is unqualified because this Jimmy Butler is ridiculous. He expected the keys to the kingdom when he got here. He wanted to lead. He was going to teach these guys how to play defense. He pushed as hard as he possibly could. He gets hurt, and the minute they leave, they quit playing defense. Karl Anthony Towns gets all caught up in his numbers. Everybody's happy because, Jimmy's not there making everybody miserable. Because that culture change, man, that culture change makes people uncomfortable. So Jimmy goes, the practice happens, he shows up, rants, raves, calls coaches and players out, takes the third stringers, beats the first team, yells at Scott Layden and says, "You need me, you effing need me." It's not exactly the way you handle yourself, right? But Jimmy's completely fed up. The guy is in the peak of his career. He's in the prime of his career. These NBA players only have a small window to win their championships. Jimmy's got more money than he can ever spend in his life, and he's going to sign a bigger contract than the big contract that he's in right now, and he wants to win right now. And winning really, really, really matters to Jimmy Butler, and it matters more to him than it does matter to other players on the Timberwolves roster. You may not believe that, but he keeps repeating that winning is the most important thing to him, that he has these goals and he's driven by them. And the facts bear this out, that the Timberwolves did need Jimmy Butler. He was the guy that this market needed, and these kind of players do not come along very often, and a guy that's inexperienced, maybe he's a future star of the franchise, maybe he's going to learn how to play defense, and maybe he will be something like the second option on the team, got to an unqualified owner and hurt you, the fan. Got the unique, culture-changing, hard-to-get free agent Jimmy Butler so frustrated that he chose to walk away. The team needed Jimmy Butler, and they let an unproven potential future star of the team that doesn't play defense and isn't super athletic and has to catch the ball at specific places on the floor to score get together with a meddling owner who doesn't understand basketball, that returns the chaos and losing ways to the Minnesota Timberwolves, and God knows how long that will last. Your team had the guy, your owner blew it. Karl Anthony Towns is a very good offensive player, but he doesn't play defense. He can't block shots. He's not a primary handler of the basketball. Got big feet, not particularly quick or athletic, says it right in his NBA draft scouting report. And he is laser focused on personal success and accolades, which is exactly the opposite of what your culture-changing free agent Jimmy Butler was. Karl Anthony Towns is just like the previous offensive star of this franchise who never made the playoffs once. So now the fans and Glenn have another future Kevin Love to put up big offensive numbers, not play a lot of defense, and will be the next Minnesota free agent to demand to be traded, complaining that there was not a team built around him to help him win a championship. So Karl Anthony Towns is really the future Kevin Love. They're guys that really care about their own offensive statistics, don't play a lot of defense. They'll fit in well with another team, and probably Karl Anthony Towns will get a ring, but he will be the third option, just like Kevin Love is. If this Minnesota Timberwolves franchise, with their new president of basketball operations, Gerson Rosas, becomes a playoff contender, a new Jimmy Butler will have to come to town. And if and when that happens, Karl Anthony Towns will have to accept a lesser role because he couldn't lead a parade. And he's young. He's got plenty of time to get better in a lot of different areas. But right now, he's not mature enough to lead anything. Championships in the NBA are won with defense. They didn't used to be, but when you get to the playoffs, defense really matters. And when your self-proclaimed star player of the team does not play any defense, it's going to affect how far your team goes in the playoffs. Nobody on this roster will follow Cat, at least not right now. With Butler gone, the Wolves just don't have the goods. No defense, no leadership, no playoffs, And it's all because the culture-changing free agent that the team is so desperately in need of arrived, took a look, and despite being offered a 4-year, $110 million extension, decided that he didn't have a chance against a diva player and an interfering owner who have never won anything. Yes, you were right about Jimmy Butler. Thanks for listening. This is Mike Talks Big. Here's the comment line, 612-424-0034. Twitter account is @Mike Talks Big. Catch you next time.